So we're now live on Facebook. Apologies to anybody trying to watch on YouTube, because apparently one can't live stream on both, but we'll get it up on YouTube. Yeah, just a reminder to ask that to have mics off if you're not actually speaking. And just to introduce myself again, I'm Sarah Glynn from Scottish Solidarity with Kurdistan. So welcome to our 14th Kurdish Tuesday. And we're very pleased to have with us today Havin Guneser, who will be familiar to many people, I think, as the person who's enabled us to read Ocalan's writings through her translations. And she'll be talking today about Ocalan's Sociology of Freedom, which has just recently come out in English. And there is a link to that edition on the meeting notice for this meeting. So I think it's particularly appropriate today, actually, to remind ourselves that there is an alternative to both far-right popularism and the neoliberalism that's brought about this hugely unequal, unsustainable society. To remind ourselves that another system is possible. Not, as Kurdish friends always point out, another world, as we only have this one, and we have to build a better system here, as they are attempting to do. So last time, I was remembering when I chaired a meeting that Havin was speaking at, it also had to be online. That time, it was due to the UK Home Office not allowing her into the country. So she is, after all, a very dangerous purveyor of ideas. So I'll hand over to Havin she'll be speaking to us for about 45 minutes, and then there'll be the opportunity for you to ask questions. Now I'm going to try and share, well, Havin, you tell me when you want the screen share, yeah?
Okay, I think you can begin immediately with the first one. Hi, everybody. I can see, I know.
I've got to find, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I can't find your thing on the. Sorry, what's happened to it? Well, do you want to start talking and I will have to.
Okay. Okay. I just want to say hello to everybody. I can see some of your names, and we've met before, so it's wonderful to see those of you again, and of course. To meet others that I haven't met before. So yes, I think Sarah talked a little bit about what is going on in our world. Today is the US elections, so we wait to see what the outcome will be. Not to say that there is going to be an amazing revolutionary change, but it might just impede or slow down the developments a little bit. But today I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the new book. There's much to say about the recent developments, both domestically within the Kurdish politics, as some of you might be following. There's, just as on a world stage, the very reactionary fascist forces are at play. In each, setting as well, there are such reactionary forces at play. This includes Kurdistan too, and especially the KDP, the Kurdistan Democratic Party. So there is a huge, huge danger of a renewed attack by these forces against the PKK forces. So, but we will see how things develop. And maybe today I can better describe a little bit more what the reason behind it all is, and what the Kurdish freedom movement is trying to do at large, and about not being able to come to. The thing is, they didn't even declare me a dangerous person. They said I'm unfavorable to public, not safety, but Yeah, so I don't remember the exact wording now. I just remember being unfavorable to you. So, but let's see what that means really. Now, as some of you may know, I am actually from the International Initiative, Freedom for Abdullah Öcalan Peace in Kurdistan. This is an initiative that was set up exactly about a month or two after Öcalan was abducted in Kenya and brought to Turkey illegally. It became a very multinational peace initiative, as the name tells, and it was founded, I think, in March, just a month after the abduction of 1999, with the support of several Nobel Peace Prize winners. You know, among them Escovel, Mared Maguire, and, you know, Jose Ramos Horta, and many other personalities like Chomsky, Angela Davis, the late Dario Fo, and many others. And there's a complete list of them on our website, freeocalan.org. So what do we do? Actually, this initiative, you know, almost 22 years now. Obviously, we're not so proud that we've been existing for such a long time. It means that Öcalan has been in an island prison for this long. So we inform about his prison conditions and have campaigns for his freedom as a key issue for peace and democracy, not only for Turkey, but in the greater Middle East. As you can see, we translate and publish books and brochures. We actually did quite a few brochures because we thought that by the time we get to translate the whole lot, it takes quite a bit of a time. So around the central issues, we made pamphlets. I'm sure most of you have seen that as well. And then we actually have conferences, which we had every 2 years, and because of COVID, we had to postpone it. But the conference is in Hamburg called Network for an Alternative Quest. So that's been going on since 2012. We like to be in discussion and in dialogue with different movements and also ideas around the world. And it's been very successful in creating such a platform, I have to say. And other campaigns like Art for Öcalan. And who is Abdullah Öcalan? Or most of you might know, and probably do know, he's one of the founders of the PKK. He's in severe isolation, a political prisoner, and he's got a Kurdish politician with the widest support across Middle East, both within the Kurdish and otherwise of the population. He's actually the author of more than 60 books. 12 of these have been written after 1999. Unfortunately, not much is translated, his prior, pre-1999 books. And of course, sometimes this can give a different reflection as to maybe that his writings completely changed after 99, which is not the case, but I'll go into that maybe later. And he's also the architect of peace process, and as you would know, he's also the person behind the ideas where Rojava Revolution was inspired from. He is the representative of the Kurds, and his signature campaigns have been a way of showing this, because there's no other way of showing that. So in between 2005 and 6, 3.5 million signatures were gathered, basically mainly in Kurdistan and some in Europe. And the conditions back then in Kurdistan, whether in Turkey or elsewhere, were quite dire. So it wasn't easy to collect those signatures. And a lot of people were actually imprisoned in Turkey, especially for signing the signatures campaign. In 2005, 2015, there was a worldwide signature campaign where 10.3 million people actually signed, so it was a huge one. And there's countless demonstrations for his freedom, which you probably see. One notable one is in Strasbourg, that is continuing now for many, many years. Now, a couple of facts on the isolation, just to put the whole picture into focus. Now, Imrale is a island which is 25 kilometers squared. It's in the Sea of Marmara. Öcalan was for 10 years the sole inmate there. There are now 4 people, including him, and all are Kurdish. And it's guarded by 1,000 Turkish soldiers, and it's still a military zone. He's had almost no contact with his lawyers since 2011, which was like 7 years and 9 months that he had no contact. And then he had a couple of lawyer-client consultations and nothing again since August 2019. So almost all of his lawyers were imprisoned at some time, but none of them were really convicted. And currently he spends 162 hours out of the whole week, like 168 hours alone. So that's only 6 hours a week with the 3 other inmates on the island. So why Öcalan's isolation? I think it's pretty simple. He is a prisoner of war. He was an adamant organizer and an amazing, most radical oppositional leader in Turkey, a true oppositional leader, one could say. He's a public intellectual, a theorist, and somebody who's a guide or, you know, a giver of ideas, like for the revolution in Rojava, including, you know, concepts like genealogy, democratic autonomy, democratic confederalism. He's also a philosopher of freedom. I think this book that we will talk today will point that out more than ever. And of course, he's one of the most important voices of the Kurds and the oppressed. And I guess, you know, whenever he talks, he kind of instills hope, and he's able to, through his voice, show people that one can overcome the present circumstances and conditions. Now, us being in Cologne, I have to mention that there is a special repression in Germany, and I guess most of you would know that Germany's relationship both with the Turkish Republic, but also with the Ottoman Empire, go a fair bit of a way. And Germany has also been, you know, one of the leaders in Europe to condemn both the Kurdish freedom movement, the PKK, and Öcalan. And an artist in Germany made this photo. Maybe you see it on your screens. And there's a big warum on at the top of his head. Warum means why, and you know, she has talked about why in her own ways: feminism, solidarity, sociology, you know, ecology, freedom, and all that inside his portrait, and asking why, you know, because his portraits, especially the ones on the yellow background, is actually banned in Germany. So yes,
Can you tell me when you need a new slide? Because I've just scrolled through to that one, but we've missed all the other ones. So
oh, I see. Okay.
I can't automatically know. Yeah, if you could tell me.
Oh, okay. That's going to be difficult to say even for me. Okay. So now I want to talk about the books, what we called prison writings. I guess, you know, we started obviously with the books after 1999. You know, I don't know if and how many of you have actually read the other books, but I guess all his books after 99 is also gives a trail of his thought as well, you know. The very first one is what we call the solution to the Kurdish question. It was actually, I mean, all of these are not books, obviously. I'm not sure whether all of you know that. These are actually defenses to various courts. And then once they become public, the lawyers get it, we get it, and then we publish them basically as books, and keeping their integrity as they are, and maybe making it available to the public. So so you shouldn't think if he's under such heavy isolation conditions, how is he able to get the books out? So they are not. They are defenses to the courts. And his very first one was to the Imralı court, and this was, of course, very much of a show trial. There was really no defense, and the Court of Human Rights also deemed that to be an unfair trial and asked for a retrial, which never actually happened. And he goes into that in some of his books as well. So I guess the way, that he did this very first defense was at a time when the air and atmosphere of lynching was predominant in Turkey, when he was, abducted and brought to Turkey illegally. What he did with this defense was he took everybody's attention from violence back to the ideas. And and he wanted everyone to focus on that instead of the continuation of the conflict. So I think this was a very much of a surprise for everybody, because everybody wanted to see him in a different light. Both the left and the racist and the nationalists in Turkey. So, but instead he brought out the ideas. So that was very important as a first defense or a book. Then came, of course, what we called Prison Writings 1 and 2, Roots of Civilization, the PKK and the Kurdish Question in the 21st Century. Here, he actually went back re-questioning, because I think that book, we still don't have it in English. He also did a defense to the Court of Athens, which came out as a book in Turkish and German and Italian, but has not yet, and of course Greek, but has not yet come out in English. And there he says, I knew, he says, what these powers, the world powers and the regional powers, were trying to do by handing me over to Turkey. So I had to think what this was for and how to get around it, because as you may remember, back in 1999, there was a lot of, the Kurds were out in the streets, really embracing Öcalan and his ideas, and believing in the fact that his destiny is their destiny, because this is what past Kurdish rebellions had shown. Therefore, these volume 1 and 2 are very, very important indeed. It's his first questioning back into the civilization. And with volume 2, it's even more important, because it is doing a huge critique and self-critique, both of the movement and of himself, and preparing the ground, for a reorientation, one could say. And I'm going on to the next slide. So, and then of course the essential text for this reorientation, which I'm working on as we speak. That's why I've shut myself somewhere, and I'm now editing this wonderful book. It's also one of my favorites, both this one and Sociology of Freedom, Beyond State Power and Violence. The original title was To Defend the Society, but we've decided to name it Beyond State Power and Violence, as it gives the content very well. So it's coming out by PM, hopefully end of this year or beginning of next year. Now, of course, another one is the roadmap for negotiations. This was also a very, very important text, because one could see how these ideas translated into a concrete proposal for a solution and of the Kurdish question, and also democratization of the Turkish Republic. So that was also a very, very important one. I'm on the next slide, and of course now what I would like to talk about is the huge 5-volume corpus, which he calls Manifesto of the Democratic Civilization. It is made up of 5 volumes, and 3 volumes have now been translated. The first being The Civilization, the second Capitalism, and the third Sociology of Freedom. Volume 4 and 5 wait for translation, and I invite anyone who knows Turkish to come forward and get in touch with me. And if you know anybody who is capable of translation, please help us get in touch with them. So I guess there's also books on Öcalan, which is happening more and more now. The one we did was called Building Free Life, Dialogues with Öcalan. More than 20 authors actually participated, and we did this for Öcalan's birthday. I guess the reason for that was that what we saw in all of Öcalan's books was that he is in constant dialogue with a lot of people. You know, he's in dialogue with his comrades, he's in dialogue even, you know, with the past and is still living intellectuals, public intellectuals, or, you know, the goddesses, or, you know, the Neolithic era, you know, you name it. So we thought that maybe on his birthday, what would be really nice is to reverse that dialogue and get lots of different people to be in dialogue with him and his ideas, in the hope that maybe this book can find its way through his jailers. To date, we still don't know whether it did make it, because we first printed it in Turkish. So, but we still have no idea whether he has it, because you know, the lawyers saw him, anyone saw him, they asked him, he hadn't then. So that is the case. And there's now a new book out. It's only in German yet. The author is called Peter Schaber, and he's called it Overcoming Capitalist Modernity, an Introduction to the Political Philosophy of Abdullah Öcalan. I'm on the next slide. And from this book, Building Free Life, David Graeber has a great, you know, text on Öcalan's style, and I really urge everyone to read it. But I want to actually read this very shortly. He goes on to say the problem with Harta Negri's approach, of course, is that it is still effectively vanguardist. Obviously, they are trying to shake off the old explicitly vanguardist model where the great theorist comes up with the strategic analysis for the masses to follow. But it's not entirely clear how successful this effort is. True, the fact that they are not the leaders of such a movement, but are just writing as if they were, gives them a lot more leeway in this regard. Öcalan, again, does not have the luxury. He actually is the leader of a revolutionary movement that started out organized on vanguardist principles. As a result, he's careful to write in a way that simply cannot be used to create that sort of doctrinal authority. Let us return to Öcalan's prose then and consider how it departs from what I've called the Marxist high style. Before I go on, actually, I want to commemorate David. He was an amazing person, a public intellectual. He was a revolutionary thinker. We are just at loss how sudden and quickly and this came about, and how unfinished actually his life with us was. Actually, there was much more that he could have given, and we could have parted together. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Obviously, that brings us to Öcalan's writings and what these books are trying to promote, and that they are not actually just written for the sake of, theory or philosophy or whatever, but there are issues and very critical issues at hand, not only just the Kurdish question and its political solution in Turkey, or democracy in the Middle East, or the fact that Kurds are cornered, with most of the local, regional, and the global powers on the ground, and are being attacked through different mediums and ways. But of course, we're living a period when women is being recolonized all over the world, one could say, and how important women's freedom and how central that is for everybody, including the Kurdish people. And of course, he is pointing out and promoting in his book peace through participatory political models. And basically, he's mapping out, especially in these 5 volumes, the system of democratic civilization. Now, of course, one of the reasons for this huge rethinking and re-questioning by Öcalan of everything, including his own movement, was the collapse of Soviet Union and basically whole of real socialism, national liberation movements and the way they ended up, social democracy. And he saw that in all of this, common problem that they all had was actually approach to the state. So, before 1999, coming to the period of October 98, when basically a renewed intervention into the Middle East was being experienced, a lot of these problems were also experienced within the PKK and, in the Middle East, in terms of, how to approach the state, what is bureaucracy doing to the organization, what are the effects of real socialism within the organization, all of these, and women's movement, how much is the men transforming, actually leaving behind their patriarchal and masculinity, ways and masculinity. I said it the other day, there was a genealogy conference, Genealogy Meets Gender Studies there too, that, the situation must have been so critical in all aspects that Öcalan in 96 came to the point where he began evaluating killing the dominant male. He called it killing the male, but for it to be understood, we translate it basically as killing the dominant male. So, come 98, not only was the regional and the world powers were kind of squeezing in, but also there was problems internally as well in terms of transforming and change. And this showed maybe the limitations as well of the past theory, which is, we always say it was always in transformation. And that's why what happened after 1999 was actually the clear break with this idea of the state. I think that, as I said, real socialism, national liberation movements, social democracy, all of these different libertarian currents, problem was to break clearly away from the state. And I think once this was done, and to be able to do this, of course, he actually had to go back to history to be able to understand, where this is all coming from. What are as the book suggests, the first book, the roots of civilization? Where is it coming from? So the central issues, therefore, is how to create a grand narrative without repeating the past mistakes, and like David suggests in his thing, not making it into a dogma either. So I think this is transparent all in his style of writing. This, again, critique of domination, hierarchy, patriarchy, state and capitalism. And he then slowly lays the foundation for this third volume called Sociology of Freedom. But I think another central issue is that, as I said, he doesn't just write for the sake of writing. One of his issue is to bring together and unite all these critical and revolutionary forces, unite them together and have a common vision to be in solidarity and in support of. So what does the book offer everybody? So I'm in the next slide. It really opens up horizons. I mean, he talks about things like quantum mechanics and how this is intertwined with the idea of freedom, you know, so he opens up lots of horizons and encourages questioning in the way we view things. He makes a lot of constructive proposals, especially in this book. I think he spreads a lot of optimism. I mean, that's why I say this very much of an aggravated isolation is always also there, because he can give that to the people by the two words that he can say, and he motivates, I think, people because he encourages them to take their own freedom into their own hands and not hand that over to anybody else. I think we saw the practical consequences of that in Rojava, and how the people there were able to take the moment when it came to produce what is there at the moment. Some of the influences, I guess, I'm in the next slide. Critique of method is, one could say, is influenced by Adorno and Feyerabend. Feminism, Maria Mies, Silvia Federici, one could see elements of them a lot there. Freedom, ecology from Spinoza, Bookchin, Nietzsche. World system and history is basically, you know, Braudel is very, very important in this regard, especially the way he views economy as well as capitalism. Immanuel Wallerstein is definitely up there, as well as André Gunther Frank. Of course, we cannot but mention Marx, Engels, Kropotkin, Hegel, Bakunin. Rosa Luxemburg is there a lot, especially in this volume, Foucault and many others. Now, I'm not sure whether many of you have actually read volume 1 and 2. I think it is pretty important to be able to do that, because especially in volume 1, he does a huge criticism of positivism. And he actually, although he looks into the civilization, into the depths of history, he opens the book with on critique of method, you know, methodology, and also truth regime of truth. So it's very important because he sets things on another footing, and looks at and shows, you know, what he regards in looking at history, you know, like how he regards mythology. He actually sees that as an amazing source of social history. He looks at prophets differently, you know, as leaders of social movements, for example. So what he does is actually he develops a new perspective, a new way of looking at history, and he calls that art of interpretation of what happened in history. So he questions a lot of our epistemologies, and he really tries to understand why do we have the inability to construct an alternative system. So there's a lot of you know, critique there, and analysis of religions, philosophy, and science. He sees class struggle very, very important, but he sees women's enslavement at the heart of any system analysis. So he sees women and her enslavement as the initial class. And he calls this, after, Maria Mies, housewifeization. I think he actually used another, he used this housewifeization, I think, before even Maria Mies was translated into Turkish, like back in the, 1990s as well. But it overlaps a lot. So later he read one of the books they co-authored with two other authors, The Last Colony Woman. So, and he really, really recommended that book to everybody. So, women's liberation and killing the dominant male is at the core of liberation struggle. And we can see that in that volume 1 very, very clearly. So he looks at he tries to find the main sources of the present status civilization. Not only that, he also looks for the sources of democratic civilization, which he says that they happen in parallel throughout time to today. And he is trying to understand how to interpret the Sumerians. And he calls that the incubation of state. And this is where construction of masculinity took place. And he sees this as the transitional phase where there was a fierce battle with women. And this can all be seen in mythologies, where the matriarchal society was completely defeated after that. So now volume 2, I'm into the next one now. Volume 2 is about capitalism. This is also a very, very important volume. He calls this the age of unmasked gods and naked kings. So, the veils on gods have been completely removed, and the kings have been completely exposed. So he looks into this to see how the rise of capitalism came about, and how he positions capitalism to be the mortal enemy of economy. And then, in this book, and especially in the Sociology of Freedom, then he does another definition of economy. And he talks about the nation state as the modern Leviathan, and he discusses, therefore, capitalist modernity. So in order to understand how capitalism has managed to, spread all over the world and dominate it, he believed that you had to understand how it developed out of classical civilization. So what is roots, in hierarchies, power, in monopolies, and how has it been able to come up with the nation state, one of its very, very important pillars. I think here, Radha's foreword, I'd like to read something from Radha de Souza. She wrote a foreword to this volume. She says, those who control our minds rule over us. Those who rule over us control what we know, how we know, and how much we know. Öcalan's concern in this text is the mentality that enslaves us, willingly even, to the destructive power of capitalism. This mentality makes us complicit in the destruction of society. His concern is to find ways to re-establish the mental structures that are needed to bring social life to the center stage of our deliberations. I'm in the next slide. So capitalism, Öcalan puts as an anomaly. So it wasn't a fate, Öcalan says. And for it not to be a fate, he goes into showing how it came about. And here also, of course, he goes into religionism quite a bit, which he delves into in Sociology of Freedom too. So we are in Sociology of Freedom. Now, the reason why this book is amazing and important is that, all these brochures, most of the concepts we've taken from this book. So this is where he actually pens down his alternative concepts and his political framework, which is, of course, at large, democratic civilization. Now, Ocalan is a dialectical thinker. So, he shows in the Roots of Civilization and the first two volumes that if there is a patriarchal civilization, a mainstream civilization, then there is also its counterpart, the democratic civilization, and thus democratic modernity. And the way he describes that is that, it's the lives and struggles of all these people left outside the system. So all the women, peoples, different cultures, workers, craft workers, etc. He describes it as a civilization based on women's freedom. And it has principles that will allow it to make democratic society possible and based on pluralism and being open to alternatives. Now, he describes the pillars of democratic modernity to be threefold. I'm in the next slide now. The first one is moral and political society. The second is ecological industry. And the third pillar is democratic confederalism. I will briefly go through them very, very briefly so I can get to the other slide. But of course, these three pillars actually, correspond to the three pillars of capitalist modernity, which is, capitalism, industrialism, and nation state. So he proposes three pillars of democratic modernity to be that. And for Ocalan, society is absolutely fundamental. And it's basically his unit into looking at how history proceeded from the lenses of what happened to moral and political society. So I guess democratic competitorism, let me talk a little bit on that, which is probably heard the most. So as you know, this is the political frame of moral and political society, and it's based on collective approval. So it's not a state, but it's a way of showing that excuse me, people can actually govern themselves without the state mechanism. And it organizes itself in the form of bottom-up assemblies, and it requires comprehensive restructuring of the society. And in order to be able to do that, democratic autonomy is its fundamental tool. So I'm on the next slide now. Now, democratic autonomy is described as radical democracy with the, direct involvement of people in decision making at every level and in everything. So that could be production, it could be health, it could be self-defense, it could be in what we call politics, which is to take decisions in everyday happenings of life and living. So it's governance through whether there is libertarian municipalities, or as we said, assemblies or communes or collectives, local councils, or any other self-organization. So this is the democratic authority or democratic governance of the people. And it is also the political dimension of the democratic nation idea of Öcalan. So all these different concepts are articulated and put into focus in this Sociology of Freedom book. So actually Öcalan also talks about how he would have liked to come up with a different name because, you know, democratic, when you say democratic nation, the word nation can be mixed up with the normal word that we know of. Whereas here, he's not talking about, you know, Kurdish people to become a more democratic nation. On the contrary, you know, he's talking about how for people, different peoples together, to become a nation without resting on power and state, because usually they're not. What we define a nation is a people with a state. So therefore, you know, it rests itself. You know, communities that exist together and in solidarity and sharing a common life. And it you know, it leaves nothing sacred, actually. Both in Sociology of Freedom and Öcalan's methodology is such that it leaves no area untouched. This could be, you know, homeland, this could be nationhood, this could be, you know, malehood, womanhood, you know, whatever. It opens up and shows how much of domination and repression it holds. So it does that with the democratic nation idea as well, and all of its concepts. So administration is not sacred, homeland is not sacred, but the land you live on, to protect that is, of course, it's important, you know. So it's not about, borders are not sacred, it's not about borders either. So, and that's why it can be cross borders, and you know, and that's why there is a different framework for each part of Kurdistan, because every one of them is in now within the borders of another nation state and live together with other peoples. So how do you overcome that? And democratic nation seems to be the best tool also for that. Now, if can you please go to the screen with the topic Sociology of Freedom? There, you know, we did this. There's this app that, you know, you put the whole thing in, and it gives you, you know, what topics there are in that given text. So as you can see, one of the biggest thing was society. So society is really absolutely central in, as I was saying, in Öcalan's writings. You know, and the reason, and I will come back to that maybe a little bit more later, in terms of why there was such a huge warfare against women throughout time, is because of her social order. Öcalan concludes. Therefore, Öcalan looks at what happened to this society throughout time, the power relations in it, and the purpose in doing so is to be able to bring about the freedom that many movements, you know, across the centuries have been striving for, including the PKK, obviously, and Öcalan. Now, the problem areas, of course, he also discusses at length in the book, and that is, again, the power and state, morality and politics. Mentality comes up over and over again, and the need to change that, because, you know, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, capitalism with all its media is at work in construing our mentality according to its own devising and to make things easier, I guess. So therefore, any theory, any paradigm has to also aim to encourage new mentality. Economy is very, very important, obviously, but another look at economy, maybe we'll see that as well. Industrialism, ecology, class and bureaucracy are also discussions, very important discussions in this book. Militarism, you know, he defines peace in a different way, and so democracy at the same time in a different way. Urbanization, women and population, family has been a special point of analysis and focus for him since 1987, because seeing how each successive regime can actually restructure us through this unit has been a fascination. And he talks over and over about how a new role maybe can be given to the family in this transformation. Yeah, so these are very, very important discussions. So he describes the economy, and I'm going to quote from Ocalan from the Sociology of Freedom. It's actually in page 299. He describes economy as the sacred occupation of women. And he says it's been turned into an area that they have been completely pushed out of. And it has been handed over to factories where war machines, vehicles that make environment inhabitable, and unnecessary products that bring profit, but have little to do with meeting essential human needs, are produced, and where prices and interest rates are manipulated on stock exchanges. So there is a, he doesn't look at economy from a patriarchal mindset or from the way, capitalism, even the way maybe, Marx looks at value theory of labor. So he's critical of quite a bit on that, and in this book. So he does a huge critique of social sciences. He critiques the fact that it's broken into several smaller disciplines. Its proximity to power, he criticized very, very severely. And in that, he sees that much more backward than the Sumerian priests, the role of scientists, He even calls some of the intellectuals like load donkeys, He wonders, why they are intellectuals if it's not for finding the truth for the society, and thus he suggests his own alternative, own academies outside of the official scientific community. So all this in parallel with what we have now, although he values, of course, the intellectuals who have been trying quite a bit to eliminate us all, like Wallerstein, like many others, like David Graeber, and many others who are not alive and who are. And, he suggests genealogy for the first time. I guess it was 2008 for the first time, and in this book in page 294 in that sense. Now, he's also, one of the topics he delves into is monopolies. And the reason why he sees the nation state of capitalism as very, very dangerous is that because he feels that it brings together and unites a lot of the monopolies under the umbrella of the nation state. It's power, it's military, it's trade, it's religionism, it's scientism, monopolies, it's over knowledge. So all of these different monopolies are put under this nation state, which makes it very, very dangerous indeed, and gives it the ability to, reshape mentalities at ease. So a state becomes the ultimate monopoly, and it surplus product and all the values. So, yeah, so as I said, economy he views differently. So one of the other important issues that he brings up is society side. So, after genocide, femicide, and all these other sides, he says, now the real danger is the society side. And by that, what he means is that he says there is a, virtual society being created, and the functions of the moral and political society that we once were are being completely damaged or destroyed, and the real society is being bombarded with nationalism, religionism, sexism, scientism, in order to completely destroy the solidarity and support, and what many of the intellectuals have called the daily communism that we have. Therefore, it becomes then, it turns then into a society of the state and into a tool of the controlling monopoly. And the danger lies is that we no longer would know how to go on being the society that can decide for itself and do things for itself, like from health to education to whatever. Before the nation states, not all of these areas were brought under the umbrella of the state, so the society was still functional and able to decide on many aspects of its day-to-day life. I mean, today, we are very quickly moving to times where we can't even have our own seeds to put into the soil. Therefore, limiting and restricting and controlling every aspect of our life. So, seeing all of this and seeing the practice of the Kurdish freedom movement itself, the need to reevaluate can be seen much better, I guess. So he had to ask the right questions. He had to re-examine to see, how were we, how are we enslaved, and to be able to find out ways to combat that and to come up with mechanisms and concepts to counter all of this. So I think in Liberating Life, Women's Revolution, in the pamphlet, I think we've summarized well. He believes slavery was achieved in 3 ways. Ideological construction there was, and we can see this in every case, whether it's women, whether indigenous people, colonized people, Black people, whatever. So there needs to be an ideological construction to make it rational, believable that that's the case. And if that doesn't work, and in parallel, you need to use force and violence, and you need to take their economy away from them. So, so therefore, this was first and utmost done to women, and it's not because of equality of sexes, but because of women's way of envisaging life during the time of matriarchy, her social order, her principles, etc., and the fact that there is no usurpation of surplus product. So therefore, she had to be beaten for a new order to be slowly come into life. So I'm going to skip a couple and come to elements of sociology of freedom. So moral and political society is utmost, I guess, to be able to, because it's one of the first pillars of democratic modernity, and what is meant by morality and politics is really discussed at great length. And I guess it can be also interpreted as the organic or the democratic society, moral and political society. So Öcalan believes that the politics must be brought back to the society, which, you know, some aspects of it can be seen in Rojava, with the many overlapping mechanisms of, you know, the oppressed segments of the society, like women, the youth, different beliefs or faiths, rather, and also different cultures that coexist with one another, and how their ability to decide for themselves have been severed, and also their ability to create their own principles in the way they want to live. So therefore, this is an important aspect within this book. Ecological industry is also extremely important.
Can I ask you to speed up just a little bit, because we're already past 8, and it's lots of time for questions.
Yeah. So maybe, you know, I'm not going to go fully into it. So there's ecological industry there as well, and economy, of course. I guess industry can be understood on its own, maybe, but economy, he really sees the actual economy, and here I think is really influenced by Braudel as well, as the house economy. You know, it's like it's the feeding, it's the just distribution, economy of needs, and economy produced by and for the people themselves. Therefore, you know, he sees the production of goods already as problematic, and also commodification very, very problematic, because it leads to robbery and theft of values. Therefore, all these are important. Genealogy, again, is an important aspect of this. And genealogy should not be understood only, you know, it translates as science of women, but it shouldn't be understood as to, you know, that it's just about women. It's not like that. It's about how women perceive you know, society, social sciences, economy, politics, self-defense, etc. And also self-defense is also part of this. So I guess in this book, what he does is he lays down, you know, including concrete proposals and mechanisms to irreversibly remove all traces of slavery from us all. I think Europe or the European society should not say that, you know, they are not a subject of this, because we should not forget that capitalism first colonized its own society before it could really move outward. So in this, therefore, to be able to do that, education of men and children are of utmost importance, and it's being done everywhere. And dismantling of power and hierarchy, again, is done through these vertical and horizontal overlapping mechanisms. Okay, I think I talked too much. I don't know where to start because there's so much to say. The next 2 books, maybe I'll stop there. Volume 4 is going to be Democratic Civilization, a Solution for the Middle East. It will look into Middle East much closer. Middle East's history, past, present, and future. And volume 5 is like a manifesto of the Kurdish revolution, he called later. But it's actually called The Kurdish Question and the Democratic Nation Solution, and defending the Kurds against cultural genocide. Yeah, so that's basically it. Thank you for listening to me. I know it was long.
Thank you very much. No, I mean, it's simply that it's nice to have questions as well. I don't know if anybody has got any questions straight away. And you can put your hand up, or you can also message me. And we'll also check on Facebook if anybody's got any questions there. I could just ask you, actually, while other people are thinking of any questions, I was just interested in your list of people who'd inspired him, and the didn't include Bookchin, who is always named as so key. At least I don't think it did. Can you unmute yourself, Havin?
Yes, sure. He's there. He's definitely there.
Sorry,
yeah.
Perhaps I was concentrating on trying to work out what slide came.
That's okay. Yeah, he's definitely up there. Yeah, sure. I mean, there was even I think he was one of the only ones that they tried to get in touch with, but unfortunately it wasn't in time. Bookchin was pretty ill at the time. So there was a couple of emails back and forth through Ocalan's lawyers, and also one of our members at the international initiative here. And, you know, and because Ocalan was especially proposing some of his books to the municipalities in Kurdistan, in North Kurdistan, for the mayors to read and of course to act on it, you know, to turn the municipalities into that kind of municipality. So Bookchin is definitely up there.
Yes, definitely. I've got a couple of questions. I don't know if people would like to ask them personally. So Rob, would you like to actually put your question? Can you unmute and... still... do you want to put your question? You should be able to unmute yourself. Or perhaps I've just muted you when you were trying to unmute, which... Oh, well, what he's actually asked is about...
I'm there.
Oh, you're there. Perfect.
I'm there. I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, you mentioned somewhere in your talk, I think you talked about youth being an oppressed minority, and you talked a bit about also the role of the family, and things like that. So my question is, does Ocalan have much to say directly about the concept of education? How does he see it as taking place in society? Is it in more formal institutions like schools? I imagine possibly not. Or is it more in the home? And also there's the university in Rojava as well. How much is that based upon his ideas? So general terms, his thoughts on education.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yes, I think, you know, education has been a main issue from day one, actually, of this movement. So it's based itself on a dialogue, you know, almost the Socratic way of education, a dialogue between different parties, and not necessarily maybe divided into age groups. Which we have at the moment, you know, almost all around the world. Therefore, you know, at the beginning, the way that the movement would have education would be cadres of all ages, of all years, experience, whatever it might be, as well as the society, members of the society would come together in groups of, let's say, 300, 400 people. And this gathering would be taped. And then this tape would go to the community. I mean, I remember even watching them when I was really young as well, you know. And it would be a very, very transparent discussion, you know. It wouldn't be to say, oh, okay, you know, you're new, or, you know, you're not a cater, you know, or you're too old, or whatever, you know, oh, you don't know this, you know, it wouldn't be like that. So it would be everybody transparently discussing what the problems are and what everybody perceives the answers to be, or how to overcome them rather. So this gave quite a bit of a transformation power, because it didn't discuss things that did not concern the society. Everybody was amazingly interested in all of these discussions, because in some ways what was happening within that movement was repeating itself elsewhere. So in fact, those discussions actually shed light into the problems experienced elsewhere. And what it did was it made this transformation for everyone to do it together. So if the movement, if it discussed the problems of patriarchy within the organization, within the PKK, let's say, and critiqued the male, this would also automatically be a critique to the male within the society, So it meant this tandem was very, very important. So this also actually allowed for principles of education to emerge later for the whole of society right now. So what's going on in Rojava, what they're trying to do is eliminate this teacher-student thing to the maximum possible optimal balance, and have it more like academies instead of this very institutionalized places, to be able to find solutions for the society, to the society, with its involvement in it. So it has an interesting way of bringing in different parts of society back into the, let's say, academy or the Rojava University. And even like we were there twice, and our main purpose for visiting Rojava was education, basically. And we went and saw the team who actually put together the books, the textbooks, for high schools and primary schools and all that. It was amazing, they had different, I think they lived like about 300 people together when they were making these textbooks, and they were Arab people, Assyrian people, Kurdish people, women, the youth. There were people from the different faiths there. And what they did was trying to prepare texts that would not be sexist, that would not be, that would not put one faith above the other, that would not be racist, that there would not be nationalism in there. So, that I thought that was an amazing, idea of doing this together. And they would revise this every year, on top of it. So, yeah, these are the ways of doing this, and gerontocracy on these bases is being tried to be overcome in case of the youth as well. When we were there, we saw that there is an assembly of Rojava University as well, that both the teachers and the students would come together to decide on their problems and the way to do things. And the students would have their own assembly separately as well. And that, for example, all teachers would have to go through an education of genealogy before they could actually teach, So there are lots of, as I said, different horizontal and vertical precautions and measures, put in place aside from the assemblies and the communes, so that, you minimize the seeping through of this patriarchal, the way that we've learned things, and to be able to undo them. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think we've got a question from S. Hunt on ecology. Can you unmute yourself? Should be able to.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm unmuted. Oh, thank you
Yes.
so much for your talk, Havin. My question, and you did start to move on to this actually, was around the ecological industry and what that means in practice. So I have read the book, and there is an awareness of ecological and environmental destruction throughout. And I suppose the key point is that it potentially prevents the realization and the successful implementation of the other projects, because it's obviously imperils society as a whole and affects social justice. But I think I even though it's mentioned throughout, it's not so clear what it means in practice. So in terms of what makes something ecological, how would that how would it be implemented, and how would it be undertaken? And obviously what kind of forms would that take, ecological industry?
Yeah. I think, you know, the whole paradigm is ecological in that sense, and the reason why I say that is, you know, that the way that patriarchal civilization works is on continuous usurpation of values and making of profit, you know. And so this hunger for continuous colonization, continuous domination has brought us to the point where, although capitalism is in a decline because really there is nowhere else to go in the world, we've basically destroyed everything, you know, and now they're talking of going to the outer world, you know, to the moon and to the other planets and all. So therefore, I think what this whole paradigm sets out to do is to put everything back into its balance and its you know, rhythm. I mean, when we look at Ocalan really thoroughly looks at how population became as much as it has, you know, the growth of population, and how much, you know, both during feudalism and also in capitalism, this regime, this establishment needs actually the increase in population, you know, because it needs consumers, because it needs able bodies to work. And so I guess, you know, in terms of then what makes industry ecological, you know, it should not be based on profit again, you know. And industry, you know, like, for example, I can give you an example maybe in Rojava, you know, for a long time, the factory of making thread didn't work because they didn't need it. Now they do. You know, they need actually thread, you know, for the needle to sew. So, you know, so it's need-based, I guess. You know, when we go and look at the problem of industrialism, I guess, and we see that, you know, the constant making of products lie not in our needs, but in the ability to make money, to resell, to, you know, to make it not so robust so that it will break down in a year, or, you know, or in 2 days, or whatever, so that you need to buy another one, you know. So I guess when we're talking about an ecological industry, we would be talking about not based on profit, based on needs, and that it doesn't damage the environment, you know, and that it actually it can meet the needs of the society in that sense. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I very, very much agree with what you've said.
Thank you.
Thanks, Havin. I don't know if there's any questions that's appeared on Facebook, so if people can let me know. I'm going to take it. There's no other question. I can ask another one. That's great. I was wondering what impact there is on the movement and on the way that people relate to Ocalan's writings. The fact that you can't actually discuss them with him, you know, it makes it very difficult to have that dialogue when you can't actually communicate with him himself, and it can actually make it harder maybe to question the writings when you can't talk to him about it. And yet on the other hand, it could give strength to the movement because you've got those discussions. So I was wondering, the impact on the movement, and particularly on the relationship to Ocalan's writings, from the fact that he's in prison and you can't communicate directly with him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, and in relation to the answer on education, that this was a movement of dialogues, you know, like there was a constant discussion, constant day in and day out, evaluating their own practice, evaluating the situation in the world. So, so all these 12 books after his abduction, you have to understand that it came at certain points. So it's not like how you're reading them at the moment. So it came at points where this very painful transformation was still going on pre-99, you know. Öcalan and the women's movement at the time were about to, you know, they were in preparation for a women's party, you know, a completely separate autonomous women's party, which happened even after the abduction as well. And the transformation of the women's movement continued to happen. But what I'm trying to say is that all these books came out at certain times, and the whole movement also went on this trail of thought with Öcalan. So as soon as it would come, the whole movement would sit down and discuss, and you know, so it wasn't that easy. And I usually give the example because state was the hardest to break off from, you know, because every other element was there, and in his books, you know, even pre-99, you know, and especially the women's freedom was really a major thing, you know, and ecology was coming on the agenda even more. We are making this special edition for a globalizations journal, and for that we are translating an excerpt from Öcalan's report to the 5th Congress, which is like 1994, you know, and he talks about ecology, he talks about the universe. It's just amazing. So we want to show people that all these discussions were not after 99. It was before 99. But as I said today as well, the main thing was the state. And, you know, if not state, what? You know, how do you do this? Because they were experiencing this themselves within the PKK. It had become so big even before 99, and it was experiencing all the problems of real socialism, you know. And Öcalan was really trying very hard to find out why, how can they overcome this, you know? Why is it repeating itself? What are we doing wrong? What did they do wrong? So I guess, you know, going back to David Graeber, the thing about Öcalan is he leaves it, like he doesn't present it as a dogma. And I think even during like these 22 years, when he had the chance to talk to even his lawyers or you know, even the state envoys or the HDP MPs who went in for talks to resolve the issue with the Turkish state, there too, you know, like he was very quick because he's just so much in understanding of what's going on. And he is also so much in understanding of the dynamics of society and his own movement, that whenever he saw that this didn't happen, then he made another suggestion, you know, but taking again to the same point, you know, to make it easier for people to struggle for their own freedom and to try and make mechanisms for that. So I guess it makes it hard in a sense, because as translators, it was hard for us. I don't know about the movement, you know, because sometimes, like with other translators, like we would discuss a sentence, like, you know, for half an hour, and then we would say, oh my God, you know, because we also look at things from a preconceived point of view. Like we, without questioning, in our heads, we've already accepted some things as they are. So even though you read it, like you think the opposite of what he's saying. So, you know, there were a couple of places like that where we came to another conclusion than originally thought, for example, you know, so that was interesting to see. So therefore, you know, I think, though, from what I know, these amazing discussions still go on within the freedom movement at large, whether it's the PKK or it's HDP, or, you know, it's the youth movement in Turkey or in Rojava or in Europe, or it's the women's movement, or it's the mixed common movement. You know, everybody is in and out discussing these perspectives, and you know, they are doing, and then coming back and saying, okay, either we haven't understood, or something is wrong, or something is missing. So, you know, the discussion deepens as a result of that. So I guess, you know, towards the end of Sociology of Freedom, he actually says what David Graeber is saying. He says, I hope that my writings don't become dogmas, as some of the, you know, other intellectuals or other people's writings have become. So that's why he's very careful in representing these as something final, but he hopes that this it paves the way for looking things at differently, discussing them differently, and yeah. So I think, obviously, you know, it would be wonderful to be able to discuss with him freely, but I think that knowing him so well, the movement is able to also carry on the discussion. But of course, we want him free a day earlier, so that all these discussions can be much more rapid. And obviously, his freedom is a freedom of a human being or an individual. But because, you know, he's become so symbolic of the freedom of Kurdish people, that his freedom necessarily means that the point has come where various states are accepting the Kurdish reality, especially the Turkish state, and you know, they've come to the point of negotiation and finding a common ground.
Do you remember all this talk about discussions in education, that when I visited Kobani, and this group of women said, oh, we've just had a short educational session. It was only 3 days. I love that. That was short. So we've got a question now from Ben. Ben?
Yep. Galax Bass, Haval, I really enjoyed that. That was a great talk. I'm just curious, I suppose, and also having worked as a translator, I really appreciate the effort you've put in, and I understand what an immense amount of work you've done. So, immense gratitude from all of us for your efforts.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the degree to which these texts are kind of popularly read in Kurdistan. Is it the case that it's really only sort of, political anoraks like maybe some of us who read them? To what degree are they kind of popularly discussed, read, and so on? Because I recently was fortunate enough to help, just start volunteering to help teach English in Rojava University, actually. And one of the induction sessions I thought was interesting. It was that don't expect all your students to be apoists. A lot of these are, pretty regular young people, who have other priorities in their lives and so on. So it makes me wonder, maybe do we in the West perhaps idealize the situation a bit too much about exactly how influential these sort of big political theory tomes actually are amongst sort of people in Kurdistan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think Abdullah Öcalan's books are amazingly influential. Like, let me give you an example. When he was delving into this the big book I've been talking about, Beyond State Power and Violence, when that came out, and Öcalan was talking a lot about the Sumerians and all that, and he was suggesting a lot of different books. It wasn't just books of Bookchin or Wallerstein or Arendt or Adorno or whatever. He was also suggesting books of like Muazzez İlmiyeçi. She is the only Sumerolog in Turkey, and Mustafa Kemal Atatürk kind of pushed her to do Sumerology, because what he was trying to prove was that the Sumerians were the forefathers of the Turkish people, right? So for very, very racist reasons. But anyway, she really became a very good Sumerolog, and she has many books. So one day, they organized a seminar and they invited her over, and even not many universities in Turkey are interested in this topic. So she was really intrigued, what's going on here. And so she went to the seminar and she expected academics, Instead, what she saw was women, in their white scarves and, elderly, the young, women, everybody, a bunch of a whole society. And and they asked her a lot of questions and everything, and then at the end she said, I have a question for you. Why are you interested in this topic? Well, nobody's basically interested. So and then an elderly mother got up and she said, well, because Öcalan talks a lot about Sumerology and the Sumerians and how it's where the state began, and you are the person for it, so we wanted to hear you talk about it. So I think Rojava may have a bit of a different story, and the reason for that is a lot of the books and all have neither been I'm not talking about Öcalan's books at the moment, I'm talking about a lot of different other books that Öcalan have been proposing for people to read so that these books can be better understood. Like he suggested literature, fiction books for people to read, he suggested nonfiction books, etc. So I think, especially in the North, this was read a lot. Basically, I think the people moved with him in reading this, but I think in other parts, maybe it is not on the same level. In Rojava went through a very, very aggressive repression of the Assad regime in the early 2000s. So everything was really, really banned for a long, long time. And they were the Assad regime was really bad against the Kurds and the activists at the time, you know. So, but I would say, I mean, I've been to Rojava as well, and not only to Rojava University. And there are lots of different, apart from Rojava University, there are lots of different academies, you know, like the cooperatives have economy academies or institutes. Women have genealogy committee, their academy, you know, and other different academies of the women movement. You know, health has its own, the youth has its own, and in all of these places, you know, in and out, there are lots of people going through having education, and all of this is basically Öcalan's books and material. So yes, let's not idealize it, you know, because it's always been like that. It's not just about the books. It's also, this is united with the mechanisms of implementation, you know. Let me give you this example. Back in, I think it was year 2000 and maybe 6 or something, 6 or 7, there was a huge festival in Europe, and back then one of the heads of the HDP came. I don't even know if it was HDP at the time, but the legal party. They came and, you know, he was talking to the public and he said, tell me, what do you want, freedom or state, you know? And people were like, state, you know? So this transformation doesn't happen so easily. This is what I'm saying. But today, like, if you go to the Kurdish people, most of them have now come to the point that they understand, you know, how bad the state mechanism is, even if it's going to be Kurdish. So it's not about, it's not about you reading here and understanding what he's saying, because what they are doing over there, it's changing the course of their implementation and their day-to-day life, you know. And I think you can see the influence of that by seeing how that is, you know, in Bakur, in Rojava, you know, even in South Kurdistan at the moment, you know. I think the influence can be understood from this, you know. If you expect that everybody can tell you back to theory as you have read and you're able to tell, well, that's where you're wrong. But you need to look at the implementation and see the understanding of the people at the same time. And that's why, actually, the way Öcalan writes is for, you know, he doesn't write in a very difficult language in Turkish. And we try to give that in English or in any other language as well. We try to give it simply as he does, because this is not, these books are not for the academia, you know. It's for the public, for them to do something with it. So he wants it to be as accessible to everybody as possible. So I would look at it like that. And the reason why probably they told you that, and we've had that experience in Hamburg, you know, with the conferences that we organize, because the way we do it is the participants, if they wish, they stay in Kurdish homes, right? So last time we had the conference, which was in, oh my God, it was in 2017, yeah. Is that, you know, oh no, it was 19, sorry. I don't remember anymore. Anyway, that, you know, we had, what was it? Do you remember anybody?
There was supposed to be one this year, wasn't there? There was supposed to be one this year.
Exactly. It was, okay, so it was 2017. We usually have it every 2 years, but this time we had it every third year.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, we had about 500 people stay in homes. 500 people. So one day, and it was for 3 days, and most people stayed like 4 or 5 nights. One day somebody came up to me and said, Havin, no, you know, I don't want to stay in this house. I said, why? Well, because they are not living like Apo is telling them to live in the books. You know, so anyway, we had a bit of a discussion, and we talked to them about how difficult this transformation is, you know, both of the men and the female, the male and the female, you know, and the youth. I mean, it's really not that easy because, as I said, you know, the system is working on them 24 hours a day, and also their own backward societal relations are also added. So on top of it, you know, you are also trying to transform that while there's so much violence for you not to do this, you know, for you not to transform this. I mean, you know, as Sarah mentioned, I mean, what have I done but translate these books? You know, I was unfavorable to publics, you know, to the public in the UK because of this. So therefore, there is all of these obstacles. And the fact that that family opens up its own home for these kind of things is a transformation on its own, you know. So one has to see it like that. So each time we touch one another, we come across one another, we talk to one another, it's showing an openness for this transformation. And you know, the Kurdish society has come a long way, I can tell you that much. I know as well, you know, from real life experience. But there is a whole lot of way to go, of course, you know. So yeah, let's not make it, you know, oh wow, they are now the perfect society. It's definitely not like that, you know, but there is an amazing tendency and inclination and struggle for that to happen. And I think, you know, maybe we should see everything in that light and not see it like a magic wand, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got one more question from, are you okay with another question, Havin?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Alex has got a question on the economy of Rojava. Alex?
Hi, thanks. Thanks for the great talk. It was really interesting. And I know you didn't have a lot of time at the end there to go over the economy, but I was just wondering about the situation there. You know, I know they have like a really strong emphasis on cooperatives, etc. But I gather that sort of when the revolution took place in Rojava, there wasn't a very strong presence of like you know, big corporations, capitalism, I guess, the sanctions regime, etc. So would they have been sort of as successful in transforming the economy if those, you know, if capitalism had sort of a stronger presence, and, you know, what would their approach have been under those conditions?
I mean, it's hard to say, you know, I can only say the present situation. I think it's pretty hard on its own, the present situation. At present situation, what you can see is that, you know, the Syrian state accepting the occupation of Syria by different forces, but not coming to an agreement table with the autonomous or the desire for autonomy of the people of northeastern Syria. So therefore, lots of parts of Syria is under Turkish occupation, as well as different powers are. It's become a playground for different powers at the moment, and therefore this really makes it very hard for you know, a proper economic policy to be implemented. because there are lots of different players who are trying to, bulge on different veins within the society. For example, the KDP is not allowing any old person, or not any old as in old, but any trader to come into South Kurdistan and take goods, but it's determining even at the level of a person who can come and do trade in South Kurdistan. So this is already monopolizing the route of buying and selling between South Kurdistan and Rojava. There is also, of course, the presence of the US, presence of Russia, Iran, and all of these are trying to employ different people for themselves, for their organizations, and etc. So pumping a lot of money in that sense at the same time. There is the obviously, the whole war situation. Afrin is at the moment under occupation. Afrin used to produce a lot of different stuff, which would also meet the needs of the people in Jizire Canton. Jizire Canton would produce a lot of different stuff that would meet the needs of the Afrin Canton. And of course, prior to the establishment of democratic autonomy there, as you pointed out as well, there weren't really any factories there. I mean, I had been in Rojava back in when was it? God, 1994. Yeah, I went to learn Kurdish there. And, there was just no factories whatsoever. And this was actually the case in Bakur until the 1980 coup, I guess. After the 1980 military coup, Kurdistan was open to neoliberalism. So they tried another way of assimilating. Until 1980, it was really suppressed. It was governed through collaborator, tribal leaders, and etc. But after 1980, they really opened it up. They saw that they can't assimilate it this way, and they really opened it up for neoliberalism. So, and the idea before 1980 was that they would take all the goods and refine them elsewhere. So, like, in Rojava too, in the Jizire Canton, you have a lot of wheat, you have a lot of cotton, but you don't have a factory that turns the wheat into flour, because you don't give that to them so that they can't do the things themselves, And there was also like no vegetation, there was no fruit, for God's sake, it would come from elsewhere, from Syria. So, and they wouldn't be allowed to grow these. So I guess, over these so many years, so there are lots of different challenges, The first challenge is that, to make sure that people can be self-sufficient in every canton, but another very important principle or situation is that the future is not certain for Rojava or northeast Syria. And what I mean by that is the attacks of the Turkish state and the stance of the regime, even Russia and the US and whatever. So what Rojava needs to do is doing actually is to deepen this self-sufficiency and to strengthen war economy. If Rojava was able to not really require much, despite the warfare, I mean, you know, 1st of November was World Kobani Day, and we saw what happened to a whole city, and we see yet what's going on, and if these people did not die of hunger and poverty, was due to this war economy situation as well, that these assemblies are organizing at the same time. So therefore, it's a mixed situation, you know. In this last visit of ours, I met somebody Kurdish, and you know, and he was a big landlord. I mean, some of the few that were, you know, who stayed behind, you know, he was convinced by the movement to not have so much land and give the land away to people, you know. So there are situations like this as well, because this is the kind of paradigm that works on convincing, collaborating, coming to a consensus, explaining. And, you know, this doesn't happen overnight. You know, this is why we keep on saying that this has been happening over 40 odd years, you know, this convincing. This is the case in terms of women's freedom as well. You know, we are convincing the men as well that it's also their freedom at stake, you know. So, so therefore, I think that at the moment, despite all odds and all the different hands in there, you know, like including the ENKS, you may have heard about it. It's the political party that is supported by KDP and Turkey, and they just want to divide Rojava into several segments, and without any elections, they want to come into power in Rojava, you know, and they're expecting everybody to accept this because KDP, even US and Turkey are forcing this and saying otherwise you have an ideological hegemony there, you know. So and and pushing this on as a democratic achievement. So therefore there are lots of different issues. The idea is, you know, this paradigm is not about is not against having a property of your own, but it's against the monopolization of the property as well. So it's not like, you know, I can't own a house or a lot or whatever, but when you begin to own a lot and you monopolize over this, then it's a problem. And this is when, like, then there is a certain action or you know, disagreement that comes with it. So monopolization in all areas are not tolerated. I don't know if that explains it. And I guess, you know, the basic principles are determined, like the principle I'm talking about, you know, monopolization of land is not accepted. And I guess, you know, from these basic principles, the vertical and the horizontal decision-making bodies are working hand in hand to reproduce themselves day in and day out, and you know, the different oppressed segments of the society are organized to say, no, you can't have this, you know, because this is against our detriment. I mean, towards our detriment. So therefore, this is the dynamic there, you know. It's not for a movement to say you can't do this, you know. And we're seeing that with ENKS, you know, people in Rojava are voicing their disagreement, not just, you know, the political mechanisms, but also the people through the different channels are saying that they don't accept this kind of imposure by the ENKS. So yeah, I guess this is the dynamic.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, important to consider the whole situation.
Yeah, thank you for just showing us how incredibly complicated it all is beyond all those wonderful ideas, when it suddenly becomes when nobody wants you to put this into practice, really. So thank you very, very much. I don't know if you want. There hasn't been any questions on Facebook. There was greetings from Norway and greetings from Italy. And just to let people know that in a couple of weeks' time, we've got Steve Sweeney from the Morning Star, who's going to be talking to us about reporting on the Kurds. And he's just actually been in Bashur and been to Mahmoud camp and stuff, so that should be really interesting. His previous, I've heard him talk about reporting on the Kurds before. It's absolutely terrifying. I don't know if you'd like to just give us a final word, Havin, before we close.
Yes, I think we didn't get a chance to discuss what is happening in the world and where we stand in the midst of all this. But I think all of these are so relevant to what is going on in Europe, what is going on in the US, Africa, everywhere around the world. And I think the point that Ocalan is trying to make is that, and which is our slogan at the moment, the time has come actually to be able to, take our lives into our own hands and rebuild this democratic civilization. Because the capitalist structures are in collapse. We have a transition in progress, which is still unclear which way it's going to go. We can see it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be automatically a better regime, as we can see from what's happening with Trump, in America, or Erdogan in Turkey, or whatever. So all I'm going to say is it's important, so much important to organize. It's not just important for Kurds, it's important for you, because it's happening everywhere. The states are collapsing, the parliaments are collapsing. We don't know anymore who's taking the decisions and how they are taking the decisions. So therefore, I think being organized is extremely important. I think finding solidarity communities are extremely important. We invite you to read Ocalan's books and find, compose reading groups, because this is another principle of actually the movement, to read together, and I could go on about the philosophy behind this, how reading together binds us together and makes us think together. And so it's really important to bring together reading groups. I think I invite you to also work in our campaign for Freedom for Ocalan. So please join us to propagate and to discuss Ocalan's ideas, and also to work for his freedom. So I thank you for listening to me. I've talked quite a bit, and but it was great being here with you, even though it was through the internet.
Thanks so much. And yeah, I guess a lot of us are going to have a fairly sleepless night. So yeah, thank you very, very much. Hope to see some people in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sarah, and everybody else for inviting me.
Shabash.
Thank you, Shabash. Good night.